When I do things.
Better people than you have tried, Rowan. It's okay.
I'm trying not to.
Hi, Andrew.
Oh, wow. I did it.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It says it's streaming live.
Yeah. Okay. How's it, Andrew? That was very easy.
Hi, Rabbi.
All right. Should we get... No, we've got a minute to go. Rabbi Chazdan Jr. is going to be very impressed with me. I said I have no idea how to do it, but Zoom is so easy.
It's logical.
Very much so. So be careful, guys. If you there was an American, I think somebody who in the middle of a Zoom meeting at work, when this whole process, this whole virus was beginning, I think he took off his pants or something. He was at home and he didn't think he was on, and thousands of people were able to watch him. I'm much less experienced on this than you are, so I'm much more likely to do something foolish.
You know, a year ago, we also weren't experienced.
Hopefully, they'll use the experience as well.
Yeah, amen.
True,
well
Andrew.
said.
True, Andrew.
Does anyone know who EM is?
No, I don't.
Errol Mendel, Rabbi.
Hello, Errol.
Hello, Rabbi.
Errol Mindel Rabbi. So he uses Rabbi at the end of his name.
Well, I don't want to boast, so I can't be Rabbi Errol Mendel, so I'm Errol Mendel Rabbi.
Okay. Right.
Hi, Errol. What's up, Errol?
Sure, what's up?
How you doing?
Yeah, very well, and you?
Well, Hashem, thanks, Errol.
Okay, let's get started. The subject this evening, gentlemen, is one of the most complex subjects in halacha. And it's really important to get it right. I would say in South Africa, given the vast numbers of handy Gentiles that are near at hand, we probably have the possibility of greater assistance on Shabbos, more available assistance on Shabbos than anywhere else in the world. But it's important to know how to do it and how not to do it. So that's what we're going to go through. Believe it or not, this chapter goes through an absolutely massive amount of halacha. We're going to be discussing not only how and what circumstances and how we can utilize a non-Jewish person's assistance on Shabbos, but we're also going to be discussing entering into a partnership with a non-Jewish person when that business has to be open on Shabbos, and the distribution of the profits, which is in itself an absolutely massive area of Jewish law. And that is far beyond my pay scale. So I'm really not going to be going into that second one in much detail at all, because it's a minefield. But we will touch on it. Okay. So, Chapter 6 of the Laws of Shabbos. We start off quite straightforward. It's forbidden for us to tell a Gentile to perform work on Shabbos for our behalf, although they are not commanded to observe the Sabbath. A non-Jewish person doesn't have to keep Shabbos. It always fascinates me when non-Jewish people tell me that they keep the 10 Commandments, because it's clear they certainly don't, because they don't keep Shabbos, and they don't have to keep Shabbos. In fact, they're not allowed to keep Shabbos. Shabbos was given to the Jewish people. It's our obligation. It is not the obligation of a non-Jewish person. And we are under no obligation to see that they keep or don't keep the Shabbos. Okay, but we can't ask them to break Shabbos, except under certain strict conditions, which we're going to discuss. We are not going to leave this in some airy-fairy general world. We're going to discuss the practicalities of what may be done and what may not be done. Okay, the Torah does say that our servant and our ox, not that we're comparing the two, but neither is Jewish, may work for us on Shabbos. Now, that's where we're speaking here of the servant. This is not referring to somebody who is working for us. This is talking about a different situation which does not exist today, and it's not remotely relevant to us in the 21st century. Hasn't been relevant for 2,000 years. Okay, and this prohibition of asking a non-Jewish person to work for us on Shabbos applies even when the instructions were conveyed to them before Shabbos. And second point, we do not require the products of their work till after Shabbos. You can't tell a non-Jewish person before Shabbos, will you please on Shabbos morning make me a cup of coffee? You can't do that. You cannot ask them to do that. You may not ask them to do that on Shabbos. You may not ask them to do that before Shabbos, work that's going to be done by them on Shabbos. And we cannot even ask them before Shabbos to do work on Shabbos that will not be needed by us on Shabbos, but only necessary after Shabbos. So we will be touching on, for example, what happens if you take a suit to a dry cleaner on Friday afternoon and you ask them to have the suit ready on Sunday morning or Monday morning. Is that allowed? Okay. Says the Rambam, the above is forbidden as a rabbinic prohibition. It's only forbidden by the rabbis. It's still forbidden. But it is only a rabbinic issue to prevent people from regarding the Shabbos lightly, lest they perform forbidden labor themselves. This is the Rambam Maimonides' reason why we're not allowed to ask a non-Jewish person to work for us on Shabbos, because we might come to view Shabbos as being something that isn't very important, and all sorts of things are being done for us anyway, and we'll just take it a step further in time and do it ourselves, which is forbidden in Torah law. There are many other opinions as to why it's forbidden. One of the reasons that's given is that on Shabbos, our speech on Shabbos may not be the same as our speech during the week. We have to speak differently on Shabbos. And for that reason, we can't ask a non-Jewish person to do work for us on Shabbos. Okay. Incidentally, the famous scenario, which is that people tend to think that you can hint to a non-Jewish person to break Shabbos, that is a mistake. It's only according to some opinions that there are situations in which we're allowed to hint on Shabbos to a non-Jewish person to break Shabbos, but generally, if we're not allowed to ask a non-Jewish person to do something on Shabbos, we're also not allowed to hint to a non-Jewish person to do something for us on Shabbos. Okay. I'm not going to be reading through everything. There's about 34 rules. We're not going to have time. I'm just reading the first couple because they are general rules. The following rules apply when a non-Jewish person performs the forbidden labor on Shabbos on his own accord. In other words, if a non-Jew, for example, turns on a light on Shabbos. So if he did it on behalf of a Jew for the Jew's benefit, it's forbidden to benefit from that labor, from that light, until one waits the amount of time necessary to perform the labor on Saturday night. So today, turning on a light takes about half a second. So you'd have to wait half a second after Shabbos to benefit from the light which he turned on. But of course, in those days, it could take a great deal longer. But you may not benefit from it on Shabbos itself, if the non-Jewish person did it for a Jew. Okay. Third paragraph, if the non-Jewish person did the labor for his own sake alone, it's permitted to benefit from it on Shabbos. So let me give you an example. You wish to go to visit somebody in hospital on Shabbos, and there is a door into the hospital which is operated by movement. Most hospitals have such doors. And if you go in front of the door, coming in or leaving, then the door will open and eventually close. So you are not allowed to go in through that door on Shabbos. And the issue is not a hospital. I'm just giving that as an example. You're not allowed to go in because your movement is causing the door to open, which is forbidden on Shabbos. But if a non-Jewish person goes in front of you, is walking in anyway, and he walks in and the door opens for him, then you are allowed to walk in after him. Why? Because he's doing it for himself. He's not doing it for you. He wants to go into the hospital or whatever place it is that he's entering. A Jew may benefit from that. That doesn't apply in every scenario. I'll give you an example. If the rugby is on Shabbos and a non-Jewish person turns on the rugby to watch, he didn't turn on the rugby for you, he turned it on for himself. So seemingly it's permitted. But there is a separate category there's a separate problem here, which is that it's not considered within the atmosphere of Shabbos. It destroys the atmosphere of Shabbos, watching the rugby. Any noise-making machine destroys the atmosphere of Shabbos. So, for example, under certain circumstances, a non-Jewish person is allowed to sweep the floor for you. Is allowed to sweep the floor. But if the non-Jewish person turns on a vacuum cleaner, you must tell the non-Jewish person that he must not in future turn on the vacuum cleaner because it's a noise-making machine and it destroys the atmosphere of Shabbos. Incidentally, if this idea of destroying the atmosphere of Shabbos, which means in Hebrew zilzul Shabbos, destroying, disgracing or ruining Shabbos, that's the only reason why on Shabbos you can't get into a plane before Shabbos, travel 25 hours on the plane throughout Shabbos, and leave the plane after Shabbos. Technically speaking, you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to do it. You're not doing anything wrong. And of course, we're talking where you don't press for the hostess, and you don't play with all the electronics on board. You just sit there. You put your seatbelt on and you sit there. So technically speaking, you're allowed to do it. Why can't you do it? Only because of Zilzul Shabbos. Being on an airplane for Shabbos destroys the atmosphere of Shabbos completely. You're not in Shabbos on the airplane, you're out of Shabbos, really. So that's the only reason you can't be on an airplane from before Shabbos to after Shabbos. I'm using that as an example because I don't think anybody would do such a thing. I think most people would understand that is inappropriate on Shabbos, being in the airplane. And any noise-making machinery similarly destroys the atmosphere of Shabbos. it's Zilzal Shabbos, ruined Shabbos, and so we certainly can't turn them on ourselves. We can't turn them on with a remote before Shabbos set it to come on, nor can we allow a non-Jew to use that noise-making machinery on Shabbos. Now, regarding things, what does a person do if, let's say, for example, they're not ready to keep Shabbos yet, and watching the rugby, which is on Shabbos, World Cup final is very, very important to them. So for that, you would need to speak to your local Orthodox rabbi, because they're watching the rugby on Shabbos is not allowed, as I said before, but there are better and worse ways of doing it. In other words, however one does it is forbidden, but there are ways in which it is not as forbidden as other ways. And it's better to do it in a less forbidden way than to do it in a more forbidden way. Right? The better you can, the less. In Jewish law, we have this a concept that even if you can lessen the degree of the mistake that's being made, that is also good. So, for example, I would often tell people that if they're going to go to shul, and nothing I do in a car, and nothing I do to dissuade them from going to shul is going to do any good. They're not ready to keep Shabbos at the moment. Is it possible for them perhaps to not turn on the radio coming to shul? I can understand you want to come to shul. You don't feel that you're ready yet to keep Shabbos, and you certainly, perhaps you live too far from shul to keep Shabbos. So you feel at this stage you have to drive. Fine. So if a person has to drive, in their own minds, I'm not saying they're right, but that's what they feel. So one doesn't necessarily have to turn on the radio in the car. And just because one drives to shul, for example, doesn't mean that one can't set up the lights in one's home so that they come on and go off on a timer. In other words, just because a person is breaking Shabbos in one way, driving to shul, doesn't mean that Shabbos, there's no point trying to keep Shabbos as good as one can in other ways, such as by getting a time switch in order to turn the lights on and off on Shabbos. That's the way we grow. Very rarely do people take on Shabbos or anything remotely as big as Shabbos all in one step. Okay. So we got a few examples of this. We give the example if for example a non-Jew turns on a light for himself, the Jew can benefit from the light. But if a non-Jew gathers grass to feed his animal, a Jew may bring his animal to eat it, provided that the Gentile doesn't know this Jew. And the reason we're worried, and this is different from the case of the light, is because here, if the non-Jew is tearing out grass or gathering it together to feed his animal, and he knows this Jew, he may add more grass for the Jew's animal. And so the only leniency here is because the non-Jew is doing it for himself, not for the Jew. But since we're talking about gathering grass, and if he gathers more grass, the Jew will benefit for his animals. So then he could do it. He could gather enough just for himself, or he could gather more and the Jew will benefit. Whereas a light, if he turns on a light for one person is a light for 20 people. He doesn't have to turn on that light more than because there's a Jew. So in a case where he could do more to help the Jew, we have a restriction that he must not know this Jew who's benefiting from it, because then we're worried that he might gather more in order to benefit the Jew. It makes perfect sense logically. In fact, once one accepts the basic principles of Jewish law with Shabbos and with many other mitzvahs, many of the details of those laws make perfect sense. And in fact, I don't know how long you have been studying Jewish laws, For example, learning the Rambam, you'll be quite astonished at the insight to human nature, that of Jewish people and non-Jewish people that the sages had. Remember here, the whole concept of a non-Jew working on Shabbos comes from the rabbis. Okay, sorry, I'll be a moment. I just got a message from the rabbi. No, we're okay. All right. Okay. We have a principle that if a non-Jew does work for the Jew, we mentioned it earlier, then the Jew is not allowed to benefit from it until after Shabbos, and he has to wait the amount of time it takes for that action to be done after Shabbos. So let's say the non-Jew did something to benefit the Jew, and it took him 5 minutes, and he has to wait 5 minutes after Shabbos before he can benefit from that work that was done on his behalf. Okay. In other words, the Jew is penalized because we don't want Jewish people to be asking non-Jews to do work for them. And so even if the non-Jew wasn't asked to do it by the Jew, but he did it on his own behalf, we make sure that the halacha says you can't benefit from that. You have to wait the amount of time it would take to do it even after Shabbos. If a Jew does work for you on Shabbos, however, right, a Jew does work for you on Shabbos, there are situations in which no Jew is ever allowed to benefit from that work. Certainly not the person himself, and even other Jewish people sometimes may not benefit from it forever. That's rather a dramatic penalty, and that comes later in the Rambam. Okay, this idea of working for Jews or non-Jews is still discussed here in halacha number 7. So, for example, I'm going to have to skip this because I really want to cover as much information for you as I possibly can. I'm going to actually leave the Rambam now, and I'm going, if that's okay with you, and I'm going to discuss the principles on which the Rambam bases the halachas here in the chapter, and which will help you know, practically speaking, what you can and can't do in your own home. Is there anyone who objects to that? These principles are specified here in this chapter of the Rambam, but the examples, for example, that the Rambam gives are examples that were relevant 800 years ago in the time of the Rambam, and for us they seem a little bit hard to comprehend. Here in Halacha 9, a Jew is permitted to instruct a Gentile to perform an activity that is not a forbidden labor, meaning it's not forbidden in Torah law, and is prohibited from being performed on Shabbos only as a shvut. A shvut means rest, and that refers to something which is forbidden by the rabbis. This leniency applies provided that this is necessary because of a minor infirmity, a very pressing matter, or a mitzvah. Let me clarify. If you need a non-Jew to do something for you, and what you need the non-Jew to do is forbidden by the rabbis, not forbidden in Torah law, and the purpose of this is one of 3 cases. A minor infirmity. Somebody, for example, is bedridden, and it's for the sick person who's bedridden. That's considered a minor infirmity. Less than bedridden isn't an infirmity, generally speaking. And somebody who his life is in danger, obviously we don't wait for a non-Jew to be available to assist them. We do it ourselves as quickly as possible. So this is sort of an intermediary case, a minor infirmity, or a very pressing matter, such as a situation where one would lose a large sum of money, or a mitzvah. There is a mitzvah to be done, and you need the assistance of the non-Jew. So let me give you a couple of examples. Let's say you've got a whole bunch of guests coming for lunch on Shabbos, and you don't have any drinks at all, and it's a hot day, right? Now, are you allowed to ask a non-Jew? Here's a simpler case. Are you allowed to ask a non-Jew to go into your garage, to open the car door where there are a bunch of drinks that you bought on Friday afternoon and that you left in the car on Shabbos? You forgot to take them out. A Jew can't do that because that is a case of psik reisha. We haven't learned it yet in Rambam, but it's a case where it's called psik reisha, literally cutting off the head, where a person is going to do an action, opening the door. The intention is not to turn on the light in the car, but it's inevitable that the light in the car is going to come on. So a Jew may not do that on Shabbos, but a non-Jew is allowed to do that on Shabbos because that's forbidden by the rabbis. And so a non-Jew, you can tell, not hint, you can tell the non-Jew to open the car door and get the drinks out. Why? Because you're asking a non-Jew, which is a rabbinic thing, to do a rabbinic thing, which is to open the car door. A rabbinic problem, the intention is not to turn the light on, but that's the problem with, and a car is also mukta, and that's also rabbinic. So again, it's only a rabbinic thing. And you're doing it for a mitzvah so that the guests don't pass out from the heat. They have something to drink. And it's so that is you're allowed to ask them to do that explicitly. Another example will be for them to go to a place where there's money in your house and take the money and go down to the shop, which is 4 or 5 doors down, and buy something which is an important part of the meal for the Shabbos lunch. You can actually ask them to do it. And the reason for that is because they're only breaking rabbinic laws. Handling money on Shabbos is a rabbinic law. Carrying the money and the drink to the shop and the change and the whatever it is, an important part of the meal, like the chicken or whatever, back from the shop, that is also only a rabbinic problem, because there are very, very few places in the world where carrying is a Torah problem. Certainly very few in South Africa. So that one is only breaking a rabbinic law, and buying and selling on Shabbos is only forbidden by the rabbis because one may come to right. So the only prohibitions that need to be broken here are rabbinic prohibitions, and it's for the sake of a mitzvah to get an important part of the meal, which is not available at present. Yes, so you don't have to hint in that situation. You're actually allowed to ask them. Or in a case where somebody is bedridden, you're allowed. We have a similar leniency. Let me give you an example. Let's say, or a young child. So if you've got a young child who is not willing to walk on Shabbos, doesn't want to walk, the child has stopped walking, and what are you going to do? How do you get the child home if the child's refusing to walk any further? So in such a case, you can ask a non-Jew to carry the child. Why? Because the person is, the child is, we're not in a public domain in Torah law. It's only a public domain in rabbinic law. I'm talking even where there's no Eruv. And it's for the sake of a young child, and it's permissible to do so. Or let's say for a young child on Shabbos, you can ask the non-Jew to turn on the hot tap in the bath in order for the young child to have a bath on Shabbos. Why? Because Turning on the tap is only forbidden rabbinically, because what's going to happen is the water is, you're only wanting to take the water out of the bath, hot water out of the geyser. However, that's not a problem. The problem is that cold water is going to come into the geyser and be warmed up. That is inevitably going to happen, but that isn't what you want to happen. So therefore, it's only forbidden rabbinically, and it's for the sake of a young child. So it's asking a non-Jew to do something that's forbidden rabbinically for a young child is permissible on Shabbos. And similar cases to this. Here we have a case where you ask a non-Jewish person to climb a tree or swim across water to bring him a shofar, to blow the shofar, or a knife for the circumcision. Yes, those things, climbing a tree is forbidden by the rabbis, swimming across water is forbidden by the rabbis. So you can ask a non-Jewish person to do that if it's for the sake of a mitzvah, for the blowing of the shofar, or for to enable a bris to be performed. Okay, here, let me give you one or two other classic examples. Someone forgot to turn on the light in the dining room, and you want the non-Jewish person to turn the light on in the dining room. Turning on a light is forbidden in Torah law. So you can't ask a non-Jewish person to turn on the light. You can't even hint to the non-Jewish person to turn on the light. But what you can do is, you can say to the non-Jewish person, will you please bring me something from the dining room? The non-Jewish person is going to go into the dining room and see that the light is off. He can't see what he's doing. So he can't bring you the thing you asked him to bring back. He will turn on the light so he can see what he's doing. And you may then say to the non-Jewish person, please don't turn the light off, leave it on. And the reason that's permitted is because he is not turning on the light for you, he's turning on the light for himself. He could have found the thing that you wanted in the dining room eventually with the light off. He doesn't need to turn the light on. He's turning it on because it's easier for him to do the job with the light on. So he's turning the light on not for you. He's turning the light on for himself. And so, as we distinguished earlier, if a non-Jew does an action which is forbidden on Shabbos for himself, then under many situations, a Jew is allowed to benefit from the work that the non-Jewish person did. But if the non-Jew does it for the Jew, it's forbidden. Another example would be if a non-Jewish person is washing dishes on Shabbos after a meal. A person could clean the dishes with cold water using one's hand. It would take a long time, but it could be done. So if a non-Jewish person has been asked to wash the dishes on Shabbos and the non-Jewish person decides to turn on the tap and do all sorts of other things which are forbidden on Shabbos to wash the dishes, then again we say that the non-Jewish person is not breaking Shabbos for the Jew. He is washing the dishes for the Jew, and the washing the dishes could be done in a permissible way. The fact that the non-Jewish person has chosen to do it in a forbidden way is for himself, for his own sake, so that he doesn't have to put such effort into it. And so that forbidden work is being done not for the Jew, but for the non-Jew. And therefore, it again is permissible on Shabbos. Okay. If you ask a non-Jewish person, this is the 12th law, if you ask a non-Jewish person, let's say, to dry clean a suit on Friday afternoon, you take it on Friday afternoon and you're going to pick it up on Sunday morning. Then even if you read the words of the Rambam, it's very clear, even if he does the forbidden work on Shabbos, he dry cleans the suit, it's permitted. Why is it permitted? Because as long as he does not have to do it on Shabbos, as long as he has time before or after Shabbos to do it, If he chooses to do it on Shabbos, that's his choice. He's not doing it for you on Shabbos. He's doing it on Shabbos because he wants to do it on Shabbos. So if you're going to pick it up, for example, on Sunday morning, he could do it on Saturday night. The fact that he doesn't open his business on Saturday night, that's his choice. But you have not caused him to break Shabbos and do forbidden work for you on Shabbos. And therefore, it's permissible. But again, he has to have enough time, either before Shabbos or after Shabbos, to do that work. If you pick it up, if you give it to him right before Shabbos and pick it up right after Shabbos, then it's forbidden, because then he has to do it on Shabbos. Okay? Incidentally, if you have any questions, please let me know. Okay, so let's say, for example, similarly, if you hire a non-Jewish person as a contractor to do a job, and he does part of that job on Shabbos, but he doesn't have to do it on Shabbos. So we say, I'm sorry, I've gone over time. We say that it's permissible because he chose to do it on Shabbos. But if it's done publicly and people seeing it being done will not know that that non-Jewish person has been contracted to do the work over a long period of time, and he himself has chosen to do it on Shabbos, right? Then one isn't allowed to permit the non-Jew to do that work in public on Shabbos, because onlookers will assume that the Jew has asked the non-Jewish person to do it specifically on Shabbos, which would create a mistaken impression. They would think that such a thing is permissible, or they think that you're not keeping Shabbos, so they'll think badly of you, and therefore it's not allowed on Shabbos. Okay, here we have one of the most complex issues in Jewish law, when a Jew enters into a partnership with a non-Jew. Let's say you want to open a business and you want the business to run on Shabbos. So obviously, it's best if the business closes on Shabbos. But under certain circumstances, and you need, as I said earlier, one needs to speak to a rabbi about the details of the case. One is allowed to open the business which will run on Shabbos. Of course, the Jew isn't involved directly on Shabbos, but the business can be opened. And you can make a stipulation, you can make a condition before the business is opened, that the non-Jewish person will take the profits of Shabbos, and the Jew will take, in exchange for that, the profits on a different day of the week, and the rest of the week will be shared equally. So, in other words, it could be that the non-Jew might get a little bit more than the non-Jew. If there's more business on Shabbos, it could be he'll get a little bit less. But you can split it like that if you are making the agreement before Shabbos, before the business opens. Once the business opens, it's a bigger problem. As Maimonides says in the next halacha, if the business is already open, then the non-Jew has to take all the profits of Shabbos, and the other 6 days of the week, the profits are split equally between Jew and non-Jew. Because there's a problem if you take, generally speaking, there's a problem if you allow the non-Jew to take the profits of Shabbos and you take the profits of another day of the week, then effectively you are doing business with the profits of Shabbos. He's going to get the profits of Shabbos and you're going to get the profits of another day instead. But if the business hasn't opened yet, it's allowed. And it's complex why it's allowed, but it's allowed. So you'd be able to basically split the profits of the business 50-50. However, if the business is already open, then it becomes a much bigger problem in general. And the non-Jew takes the profits of Shabbos, so that's 1 day of the week, which is his alone. And the other 6 days of the week are split 50% equally. So obviously the Jew in that situation will get a smaller share of the profit. It's very, very important if a person is considering opening a business which runs on Shabbos, to speak to the rabbi before the business is opened, because otherwise it's much more problematic even to open such a business. And it runs, then it could, once it's open, the Jewish person it could potentially lose a great deal of money as a result of that. Okay. All right, I'm over time already, and I apologize for that. I don't think I've covered absolutely everything. It was probably a great deal of information to take in a short amount of time, but I tried to explain as clearly as I could. Does anyone have any quick questions before we go?
Rabbi, how does a non-Jew allowed to take temperature for a Jew when they go to shul for COVID? It's not for him. He's not doing it for himself at all.
No, it's not. The answer is because lives are at stake. When lives are at stake, we are more lenient. I'm sure you're familiar with the permission that's been given to turn on and off your alarm system on Shabbos. If actually on Shabbos itself, using a spoon or another item of cutlery, because there you're doing it in an unusual way. Yes, you're turning on your alarm system and turning it off, not in the way you normally do it. And in Jewish law, the things that are forbidden to be done on Shabbos are the image, the mirror image, so to speak, similar to the way they did those actions in the tabernacle and in the temple. They didn't do forbidden things on Shabbos in unusual ways. They did those things in usual ways. Doing them in unusual ways is forbidden rabbinically. Similarly, asking a non-Jew to take the temperature is a problem rabbinically. But in a case where like South Africa, where alarm systems are necessary to save lives, you can do it in an unusual way because it's only breaking Shabbos rabbinically to protect lives. Similarly, the person who's taking the temperature, asking them to do it is only forbidden rabbinically, but it is necessary to preserve lives. Yes?
What would be the situation with a virtual business that operates over Shabbos?
Oh, good question. So you will notice that all the Frum websites are closed on Shabbos. They're closed on Shabbos. Hang on a second. Well, this one isn't. This is Chabad.org, and it's still Shabbos in New York. They certainly used to be closed on Shabbos. Maybe they're being more lenient because somewhere in the world it's not Shabbos, and so there can be Jews or certainly non-Jews using the site in a permissible way. But anyway, do you mind if I do not answer that question because it's too complicated for now?
It was merely curiosity. I don't mind at all.
Okay, thank you. Generally speaking, the principles that I gave apply. You know, if it hasn't been opened yet, and you have a non-Jewish partner, so then you can split the profits. He takes the profits of Shabbos, you take the profits of another day of the week, and the rest of the profits are distributed equally. That's the general. It is preferable not to have a business open on Shabbos, whether it's with a non-Jewish part, even if it's with a non-Jewish partner. Are there any other questions?
Yeah. Thanks, Rabbi.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I wish everyone a very good Vach.
Thank you, Rabbi.
And please God, I'll see you next Saturday night.
Thank you.
Cheers,
Thank you.
everyone. Have a good week.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
My
Cheers.
pleasure.
Bye-bye. Yeah,
Wacht hier.
thanks. Good luck, Rabbi. Yeah, thanks.